Okay, I answered that phone and was actually somebody wanted to talk to me about the last podcast that I was just discussing with you, where we talked about whether life is the reality is actually a reality, or whether it's just a mirage or an image, or fake or whatever. So let's get back to Socrates. So the Phaedo is I was saying that the background of the Phaedo was Socrates was condemned to death by the powers that be in Athens because he was undermining their authority by putting all these questions in the minds of these young people, questions that people have been pondering for thousands of years since Socrates was poisoning the minds of young people by making them ask questions. In my field of law, we use the Socratic method all the time, and so pretty influential little guy he was. So they sentenced him to death with this made-up trial, but they didn't want to kill him. One, they didn't want to make a martyr out of him, which they ended up doing. And two, apparently everybody liked the guy, even though he was irascible. I like irascible. Been called that myself a few times. By my enemies, may they rot in hell. So Socrates is condemned to death. And he's sitting in his cell waiting for the dawn, which is when he's going to be executed, and in pops Phaedo. So Phaedo, not Phaedo Doe, that's a song. This is just, his guy's name was just Phaedo. His last name was not Ado Doe. You music fanatics. Phaedo Doe, okay. That's Cajun, That's Cajun music. My people, I was born in Cajun country. And I do like the Zipper Zydeco, and I'll play some for you one of these days. Of course, I might get another, hey, you've infringed somebody's copyrights, which happened when I played the Elvis Presley song. What? I'm digressing again. So what? Learn to live with it. So, anyway, stop criticizing me. Damn it, Craig. So, you too, Mike. Yeah, and you, never mind. I don't have enough time to go through all the names of all of you people who are apparently bitter and jealous and criticize me. So Phaedo comes to Socrates and says, Soc, or Crates, or whatever they called him. It was, they were friends. He says, yo, Soc, he says, here's the deal. I'm busting you out of here. Everybody's, in on this thing. This comes from the ruling muckety mucks that sentenced you to death. It was all part of the plan. You're leaving, and I'm supposed to get you out of here. And then we've got a boat waiting for you, and you're going to go to Cyprus or Miami or someplace. I forget where they were taking him. And Socrates looks at him and he says, no, I'm not going. He says, what do you mean you're not going? I just told you, this is the plan. We're going to get you out of here. You're going to be a free man. You're going to Miami. You're going to have, you're going to drink martinis and enjoy life. So Socrates looks at him and says, what's a martini? Never mind, you'll like them. So Socrates says, no, I'm not going. I ain't going. You can't make me. He says, why not? Aha! This is the opening Socrates is looking for. This is his chance to talk again. Okay, but this is all written by Plato. And this is a play. But it's really just an excuse for Socrates to opine on all of his views, including about life and death and reincarnation and yada, yada, yada. But the first thing he says is, all my life I have believed and taught that whether you like it or not, the integrity of the state must be preserved and respected. He said, now, I've been sentenced to death by the state. And if I escape, I have just undermined everything I've taught all these years about respecting the power of the state, whether you agree with it or not, because without respecting the power of the state, we have anarchy, we have disorder, and then we have no civilization, and we can't survive as a people. So, for the principle of the thing, this guy was really big on principle. For the principle of the thing, I ain't leaving. I'm going to die tomorrow. He says, you're going to die. He said, your life will be over. He said, no, it won't be over, because there's reincarnation. Socrates never said, I believe in reincarnation. He said, there's reincarnation. And Phaedo says, well, explain that to me. Now, this isn't Phaedo saying that. This is Plato having his character Phaedo say this to Socrates, who then responds in a way that Plato knew he would respond because Plato was his best student. He got straight B's. Everybody else got D's and F's. Socrates was a tough teacher. I knew teachers like Socrates. I mean, grade-wise. But I don't want to get into that because I'm going to start reminiscing about my past. I'm going to get depressed and angry, and you don't want to see that. I know you don't want to see me happy either. Yeah, well, you're going to, because I'm going to tell you what Socrates had to say. So Socrates, or Crates, says, or Sockman, some people call him Sockman. That's why Phaedo is always, when he wants Socrates to expand on something, he'll say, sock it to me, sock it to me, sock it. Well, I liked it. Okay, all right. So you don't have to listen to that part again when you rewind. So Socrates says, look, pal, the soul is immortal because it doesn't die. When the body dies, the soul doesn't. Oh, really? How do you know that? He says, because I put the body on a scale and I weighed it. He says, you weigh the body immediately prior to death and immediately after death, and it weighs the same thing, which means the soul has no weight. Now, I know what you're thinking. Huh? How did he pull that one off? Would he go into some guy's lying on his deathbed and said, excuse me, you don't know me, but I wonder if I could weigh you just before you die, which will be any second now. And then the guy dies, and then he says, well, I do have to ask him if I can weigh him again, because he's dead. And he weighs him a second time. He comes up with the same result. So the other question is, how could he be so accurate with his weighing? But he said, when you weigh the body before death and after death, it weighs exactly the same thing, which means the soul has no weight. Now, Einstein would say that means the soul has no mass. Remember, mass means resistance to inertia, which means if you want something to move, you have to push on it, and the resistance to that push is measured as mass. The reason we don't say weight is because you can have mass in outer space, but you can't have weight in outer space because you're weightless. But in those days, they didn't distinguish between weight and mass, so if you say weight, it means mass. So what he was saying was the soul has no mass, because when you weigh the body and you weigh it before death and after death, the soul has disappeared, but it doesn't weigh anything. So it doesn't die, because it continues on. It didn't weigh anything before, it doesn't weigh anything after. And the body dies, it disintegrates. So that's Socrates. What did I just tell you a minute ago that we learned from Einstein? Energy rather, the amount of energy in the universe is a constant. It can't be created, it can't be destroyed. It can be moved around so it becomes a solid. Appears to be a solid. That's why I say it's a mirage. It appears to be a solid, but the reality is it's not, because you can take it apart and it disappears altogether and has no mass. It's not a solid. So Einstein would say what the better description of the soul, to say that the soul continues to exist is fine, but another way of saying it is the soul is pure energy because it has no mass. We know it exists because you wouldn't be listening to me if you didn't have a soul. You wouldn't be together as a life form if you didn't have a soul. As soon as that soul is gone, you just disintegrate. Just like those vampires do in the movies where they, not the original one when he hits them with the stake, because then he just crumbles. But, you see these more modern vampire movies where the vampire gets shot with a silver bullet and there's a red flame in there, and then they just disappear. They go boom, and they just explode into pure energy. Now, I happen to know that that's what really happens with vampires. And how do I know that? Because I've been to Romania. I've been to Dracula's castle. I know vampires when I see vampires. You can usually spot them by their teeth. But we don't need to get off on that track. I love talking about vampires anyway. The original Dracula was actually the scariest book I ever read. I've read it since. It's not so scary. But when I was a kid and I read that thing, man, I could barely get to sleep for, it took me at least a half an hour to fall asleep after I read that. But that's accurate, because when the soul is gone, the body falls apart. It has nothing to hold it together. So the soul is pure energy, which means it continues to exist in some form. The form is energy. What form is energy? It doesn't have any form. It's like that song about Maria. That's why I like that stupid song. How do you hold a moonbeam in your hand? You can't hold light in your hand. You can't hold energy in your hand. But we know it's there, and that's what the soul is. The soul is a form of energy, and which all of us have. So if that's true, Einstein believed in life after death. Socrates believed in life after death. But most significantly, I believe in life after death. And I believe in it for maybe slightly different reasons. I can't believe that, people like my parents disappeared and don't exist anymore. That my little doggy, the ones I've had before that died, that they just disappeared. All the wonderful people, and bad people too. I mean, maybe there is a hell. I don't really know. Maybe I'll find out. Maybe you'll be down there with me. So, in fact, you probably will. From watching this show, which you shouldn't be doing, you should be praying. Anyway, I'm not big on organized religion, even though I was a very good Catholic. I was an altar boy. That's right, I was. I speak Latin, but that's just because I'm a lawyer. But I think there's life after death for that reason, but from the purely scientific reason, I think that Socrates makes a pretty good case, as does Einstein. So, the other question I have, though, is they did ask this, is, well, how does Socrates, did he really weigh people, and how does he know that his instruments for weighing people were that accurate? But guess what? We have really, really refined that whole business of determining what the mass of something. We can determine the mass of an electron, which is really, really, really small. That's right. Smaller than my bank account. So, it's like, okay, we can really measure things, and guess what? The body still weighs as much before death as after death. Think about it.